women who end up in the best relationships, who actually end up happy in relationships with men, are always the women who operate from a place of, I am not afraid of being single.
We women were sold a lie that when you marry, you're going to be happy. Marriage makes you happy. Marriage makes you fulfilled. Once you find a partner, everything goes well with you. That is when you live happily ever after. And then they make you look as if being single is a disease. So most women are afraid of being single. There's a video I stumbled on TikTok, so I shared with you all today. And the lady was saying that if you are not afraid to be single as a woman, you would not be in a bad relationship, because you know that you are happy single. You there's no problem you being single. So when a man wants to be in a relationship with you, he has to try harder and convince you to change you from being single. Let me roll the clip for you all to watch to the end, and I'll be back to share my thoughts at the end of the video.
I just watched a great video from the YV Edit and I wanted to talk about it. Now, I'm sure you already know who she is, but I'll tag her down below in case you don't. And if you don't, what are you doing? You need to go watch her video. But anyway, her most recent video, she was talking about how to find a good man. And I wanted to talk about it because I agree with a lot of what she was saying, and it echoes a lot of what I've said in previous videos about how I believe that women who end up in the best relationships, who actually end up happy in relationships with men, are always the women who operate from a place of, I am not afraid of being single. In fact, often those women love being single. For them, being single is the gold standard by which they will judge all relationships. And why I wanted to talk about it is because I think like my story and her story are a little bit different, and so my perspective is slightly different. Like, even though ultimately we've come to the same or similar sort of conclusion. So she seems to have had this perspective very early on, and seemingly like throughout her whole young life, she has always been sort of afraid of ending up in these bad relationships. I, on the other hand, was probably a lot more like many of you in that I was a lover girl. I was bought into the sort of romantic idea of relationships and marriage. And so I know what it's like to almost desperately want a relationship with a man and then be bitterly disappointed by relationships with men. And I feel like for me, I had to kind of go full circle in that I had to let go and unlearn a lot of things that I had bought into about marriage and relationships in order to then find happiness in a marriage and a relationship. I also saw how that shift in mentality and approach to dating really completely changed the types of men I was attracting, the types of men I was repelling, and just how I dealt with men in general. For me personally, two things happened that changed my perspective on dating. And that was one, obviously having a bad relationship. Now, it wasn't bad. It was kind of like bog standard bad. It's the typical sort of, moved in with my boyfriend. We did the whole 50-50 thing, but somehow 50-50 didn't extend to any of the domestic labor or the emotional and mental labor in the relationship. I eventually woke up and got out of that relationship. So, lesson learned. But the second thing, of course, was my job and when I started working in family law. And that was the really eye-opening thing for me, because up until that point, I had still the rosy idea of what marriage could be like, what romantic relationships were supposed to be like. Because let me tell you, nothing opens your eyes quite like spending your days listening to people talk about the breakdown in their marriage and all of the problems that they have. And in particular, I noticed very clear differences between what the women would tell me and what the men would tell me in terms of the problems that they had in their relationships. My observation was that women seemed to be very afraid of being alone, that they didn't like the idea of being single, and that even at the point where they were getting divorced, it was like the biggest problem that they had was this stigma that they would now face being divorced, and that had almost led them to stay in the marriage way longer than they knew they should have. And a lot of them said that they wished that they had left earlier, or that they had never married him, that they should have seen the warning signs, but that they were just so bought into this idea that they had to get married. And there was this guy who was willing to marry them, so they were willing to almost ignore or put up with all kinds of nonsense in order to just get married. I don't say this to blame women, because like I was right there with them, like bought into that idea too. It was just that it made me realize that I had bought into a fantasy and a lie. Listening to their stories over and over again, because a lot of them had shockingly similar stories, it opened my eyes to the fact that, yeah, maybe marriage isn't all that. Like this idea that when you get married, it's somehow unlocking the happiness that you've always wanted in your life. Like, maybe that's not true. In fact, for a lot of them, it just made their life worse. So, you know, it changed my approach to dating. And so I say all of this because a lot of my content centers around early warning signs, red flags, things that you should be looking out for, how to vet men, blah, blah, blah. But none of that is going to be helpful if you are not in a place where you are comfortable walking away from any man at the first early warning signs, and you are comfortable being single. Because I think if you're honest, a lot of the times you saw the warning signs, okay? I saw them too, but you know, we choose to ignore them because we are too afraid to just be single. You are operating from a place where you want a man, you need a man, you will ignore and be willfully blind to a lot of warning signs, because it's almost like you don't want to see them, because seeing them means having to walk away from the relationship. And what if you never find a man? What if you never find a man who will meet your standards and you will die alone? And that is exactly the mentality that I want you to unlearn and to work on, so that for you, being single is a good thing. When you are operating from a place where being alone is like your gold standard, now men have to convince you that you should be in a relationship with them. And that's not actually an easy task, because now the bar is set so much higher. You're not afraid of just letting go of men who are going to materially make your life worse, because you have embraced being on your own and are able to be happy in that place. And so now it's like, well, I would only accept being with a man if he's going to make my life actually better. That's the only real way that you can raise your standards, because genuinely you have to be so unbothered about walking away from any man who doesn't meet your standards and not worry about, well, oh no, now I'm going to be alone, because it doesn't matter. Because being alone is a good thing. It's much better than settling. So anyway, that's all I had to say about that, but that's just my opinion.
I went ahead to look for the creator she was talking about, and yeah, she's always making so much sense. We've actually talked about some of her videos in this channel before. She was also expressing herself, you know, saying why she actually likes being single, and she's not afraid being single, but she's currently not single anyway. So she's like, she's not afraid being single. That's why it has been helping her till this time. Let me roll a clip for you all to watch to the end, and I'm back sharing my thoughts at the end of the video.
Number one thing about finding a good man, in my experience, is you got to be terrified of ending up with a bad man. That's the only way I can explain it. But let me give you some of those examples that helped me to reframe my perspective on that back in the day. First of all, I really did not grow up afraid of being single. So I'm gonna just throw that out there. And I'm still not. I think that being single is good for women, especially in this world. And I think practically, unless you are with the right man who makes your life better than it would be single, with you being able to provide for yourself and all, the only time you should end up with a man is when he makes your life actively better. And I got to see so many examples growing up you know, basically side by side because of where my mom worked and because I was raised by a single mom, I got to see so many examples of how single women live and conduct themselves, even single moms, like even women with children, versus how married moms, you know, live and conduct themselves. Like the single moms usually, you know, still had a job, was able to provide for herself, like still had a good relationship with the kids, etc. But when they came home, that's all they ever had to worry about. My friends who had dads, usually the mood of the whole family would always depend on the dad. Usually the well-being even of the entire family and the provision for that entire family would be up to the dad. And a lot of them chose to act in ways that even as a little kid, you can tell are actively harmful. And honestly, while a lot of people probably felt sorry for me growing up without my sperm donor in my life, I actually, even as a kid, was like, no, I think I actually have it better than all of these other kids because it's just me, my mom, and my grandma. But nobody's getting like drunk and throwing things around in the house. Nobody is gambling all their money away. Nobody is being abusive towards my mom that I have to witness. Like, you have to realize that on the whole, married women suffer a lot more than single women. Even if the worst thing about being single was really being lonely, like everybody says, which most single women are not lonely. That's another projection that men have weaponized against women. But really, for most women, being single and being lonely does not go hand in hand as much as being married and being lonely at the same time. Being isolated from all your friends, having your life be completely consumed by the wants, needs, and whims and moods of your husband. All of these things don't happen to you if you're single. So at least you're not in any active harm or danger. And that's how I viewed marriage from a very young age. Okay, so that's the starting point. You have to start viewing marriage to a man as a literal liability, as a literal, like, sacrifice. Because in most cases, it is. Then you can start thinking about whether you even want to get married or not. But most women, most little girls, are taught from a very young age that the sacrifice is normal, that the sacrifice is inevitable, that the sacrifice is necessary. And none of those things are true. You have to not be afraid to be single. That is the only way that you will find a man who can handle all the other things that you would want in a relationship. Secondly, as I'm sure most of you have figured out, I'm quite neurodivergent. So to me, things are very binary. From a very young age, nobody really forced any kind of like gender identity on me per se. So I really went out and into the world thinking that I really have as much value and worth out there as a boy. And so every time that I didn't, it was like very obvious to me, like very obviously unfair, because nobody taught me to excuse away boys or men's behavior. My radar was very finely tuned to like any sort of negging or misogyny happening because I really expected it to not happen. Also, because of my neurodivergence, I take a lot of things just simply at face value. Like, I take what people say and I just assume that it's true, right? Like, I mean, it's a crazy concept, I know, but it gave me a different perspective on a lot of media that I consumed growing up. I have a video talking about Jersey Shore and other reality TV shows like 16 and Pregnant really helped to like illustrate those dynamics where it's fine when a man does it, but it's not fine when a woman does it. Like, all of those kinds of double standards were very clear to me in those shows. And so I just became absolutely terrified of ending up with men like that. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I was just like, I am not going to be a girl that gets freaking pregnant in high school. The guy like stays with you just long enough to like hold the baby once, and then he is absolutely like bored and disinterested and picks a fight with you and breaks up with you and abandons all of his responsibilities. And now you can never get a hold of him. Now he doesn't want to pay child support, etc., etc. I was like, that's not going to be me. You know, watching Jersey Shore and seeing how bad one of Jenny's ex-boyfriends, like, literally just destroyed her house, stole a bunch of her things, like, all of this stuff. Like, I was like, oh, men are not like a joke. Like, this isn't like hee hee ha ha funny. Like, this is actual abuse and destruction of property. So I, like, don't want that. And I was very terrified. Like, I was literally scared to end up with a man like that. I would study the behavior of these douchebags. To anybody who acted or sounded like that, just cut them off immediately. Because also, plain and simple, when a lot of men come down to their last fuck to give or whatever, like, no matter how much control you think you have in a situation as a woman, right? Like Sammy with Ron on Jersey Shore, like, a man can just destroy all of your things like it's nothing. You know, like, men will stoop at nothing. They will stop at nothing to prove their dominance. So anytime that you actually try to be strong around a man or stand up for yourself, a lot of them react by trying to dominate you and trying to prove you wrong and drag you down. And I was like, that just does not seem like fun. Being in a relationship with a man just to be in a relationship sounds exhausting and seems very embarrassing. And it is. The way that men treat you at the outset is how they're going to treat you. It's actually, in fact, probably the best that they'll ever treat you. I basically experienced all of these things in my first long-term relationship. The whole like not receiving emotional connection, the whole like not feeling seen or heard in a relationship, feeling like really just an appendage, feeling like you are by far not as important to the person that you're with as they are to you, but feeling like embarrassed by that, feeling like that dictates your worth as a woman. Like all of that made me like really realize that even if it's not outwardly bad, like you're not getting your things destroyed and nobody's like screaming at you all the time, even that passiveness and like indifference is a lot. It's a lot to handle, and you're going to be miserable the whole time. So I was literally terrified to end up with a man at all. At the time, I was kind of like deep into Christianity, and I was like, maybe I should just, serve the Lord with my life, because a man honestly sounds like a hassle. Like any Christian man that you marry is going to want to have like 7 children, So I was like, church is not even the answer for me to find a man. I'm literally at this point just like, I'd be scared. I'd be terrified if a man asked me out or asked for my hand in marriage or anything like that. Yeah, basically the first man that I wasn't completely terrified around is the man that I married. And I think another really good thing to look out for is whether that person really wants to get to know themselves, because that is where all of our problems start and they end typically with other people. If a person is not interested in getting to know themselves, or if they're not interested in learning from their own behavior, or if they're not interested in having their behavior like reflected to them, because that is, as a woman, that's what you are often going to do in a relationship, because all the emotional labor is on you a lot of the times, because men are not taught how to do it and they're not taught how to express their emotions properly. So when you express emotions and you reflect that person back to themselves, how do they react? When you tell them that something they did really hurt you, how do they respond? Do they respond with denial, like gaslighting, whatever? That's a person that's not willing to look at themselves. That's a person who's not willing to better themselves, not just for you, for themselves. A lot of men lack this very critical ability to introspect. And so when you as a woman overlook small red flags, like not being able to take responsibility, or, gaslighting, or not being good with emotions, when you just dismiss that as, oh, he's just not good with his emotions, blah, blah, blah. Just know that that is the hallmark of a person who's going to be in the same place where they started 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. And you're going to be repeating the same mantras to yourself. Oh, he's not emotional. Oh, he's not good with that. He's great about everything else, but I just feel completely emotionally neglected and I don't feel like anybody loves me, but that's okay. We've been together for 40 years. Like, that's the only thing you're setting yourself up for when you ignore the small little red flags and you ignore how much of a detrimental effect a man can have on your life. And also, as a young woman, when you forget that the men you're dealing with come from a long line of men who have historically forced women to stay married to them regardless of how they were treating them. These are the men. These are those men's children and grandchildren that you're dealing with when you go to date. So you have to be more scared. That's the only way I can really viscerally explain it to you. You have to become terrified of being love bombed, of being gaslit, of being shown these narcissistic behaviors that men do effortlessly. Y'all realize when you talk about men gaslighting and love bombing you, those are only things that are otherwise associated with narcissistic personality disorder. I grew up with a parent who had that, so I can tell you right now, that kind of attitude, that kind of behavior never gets better. It never improves. And it won't ever stop until you go no contact with that person. And until then, you're just going to be beating your head against a wall. If and when you ignore these warning signs from men, these little red flags of nagging, of mansplaining, of gaslighting, of manipulating, love bombing, blaming others, and just never taking accountability. If you came to somebody with a request for accountability and they did everything to avoid it, and now you feel like everything's been turned around on you, whatever, you can't overlook that just because they didn't admit to their fault. You have to be okay with maybe they won't see it. And I will just have to walk away because I won't be with a person that doesn't see me, that doesn't hear me, that doesn't respond to me, that doesn't want me to feel safe around them, ultimately. Because when you do have a person like that, nothing is going to be like pulling teeth. None of your interactions are going to feel like you're forcing it. You won't have to beg for anything if you are properly terrified of having to beg for something for the rest of your life. And if you ever want children, all of this goes for you times 10, times a million. Okay, because I'm talking as somebody who is not going to have kids ever. And even without kids, like tying your life to a man is a liability for women. It is, because of the dangers that they can bring and because of how slowly all of this can sort of creep up on you. People who try to get away with like small little things, they're doing that to test you. They're doing that to test the waters. Okay, if they didn't want to later on abuse you, they would take responsibility and accountability for what they did. And they would not spend all this time back and forth fighting with you, doing anything under the sun just to avoid, what they feel like is a finger pointing at them. No matter how many times you explain to him what's wrong or how he did it or whatever, he's going to act stupid every single time. And every single time you forgive him, he knows that he can do that again. And you know that he can do it again. You have to understand that the only person looking out for you is you. And you have to be very scared of what can happen if you let your guard down. Okay? So stay safe out there. I love you so much.
These two women, to me, they are actually making so much sense, and they are just saying the truth. They're saying the truth out loud. And if you really sit down and reason, you will understand what they are saying, because I feel like we women, the way they make us feel like you will be lonely, you will feel lonely, you will feel, it's very bad for you to be alone as a woman. You should always need a man. Even when you're successful, you need a man. Even when you should just always need a man. So because of that fear of being single and not have a man around you, a lot of women put their hand into so much things just because they want to get a man. You see them saying, I'm doing this for my man, even if they don't like it, they do it for their man. They dress a certain way for their man, they do some certain things, or they stop some certain lifestyle because they want to please a man. All these are doing this because they're afraid of being single. And most of them actually settle for less and try to, take a lot of red flags and ignore a lot of red flags because they're afraid, okay, if I leave this partner, what's going to happen to me? At the end of the day, I'm going to be single and no man's going to look at me, right? You will see some people in bad marriages, staying in bad marriages, even while they are not happy, they're being abused and everything. You see them staying there, and the next thing that comes out of probably people around them is like, nobody's going to marry you after 3 children. Nobody's going to be with you. And they put that fear of, oh, you're going to be single and lonely to women. You see women coming out to say, I don't want to have children, and they push that, oh, you're going to be lonely, you're going to die alone. They make that a lonely thing to, I feel like it's like a fear they put in women to make them always want to be in a relationship, always want to, just pick anyone they see, even if they're not ready for marriage, and a man comes to make them and be like, I want to marry you. You see them just like, okay, marry me, because I'm already getting to a certain age that people start asking me what's up. So they do all these things because most of them are afraid of being single. So I feel like if ladies now change this feeling, I feel like things will be better. And when you meet a man, and when a man wants you to be in a relationship with him, he needs to convince you that you need that relationship. He needs to add value to your life before you can actually start giving him your time, your money, your resources, and all of that, your energy, right? So if he doesn't convince you and all of that, you're like, you know what? I don't see reason why I want to date you or why you want to be in my life, because you're not adding or subtracting anything in my life. Like, when women stop feeling that they will be alone, or when they stop feeling afraid of being single, they will not settle for less. They start being in a relationship that will benefit them, because they'll start seeing benefits from this relationship. Okay, I'm with you now. What is the benefit? What am I going to get out of being with you? Like, is it going to add to my life, or is it going to subtract? Those are the questions ladies start asking themselves when they stop being afraid of being single, if that makes sense. What is your take on today's conversation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Respectfully, it's your favorite girl again, Mara Davis, and thank you all so much for tuning in today's video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe. Please turn on the post notification bell so you can get notified once I upload another interesting video. And I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.